Hello and welcome to History Drone. I'm your host, Damien. History Drone is a channel where we attempt to bring to light some forgotten and otherwise underappreciated buildings and historical sites across the UK, using a combination of my, and I emphasise this, amateur drone footage and historical knowledge and research of the place in question. We're hoping to bring some sort of love back to these buildings and bring them back into the public eye so they can get some much more deserved love. If you like the content and would like to help us, please go to our Patreon on screen now and hit that subscribe and bell icon so you can be notified of future videos and content we upload. We're starting this week in my hometown of Exeter. And right off the bat, I'd like to debunk a common misconception that people have about Exeter, and that it isn't actually a Roman town. I can hear people already angry typing in the comments. This isn't true, actually. The settlement is long earlier than this. There's actually historical evidence of this going way back to 250 BC, and possibly beyond. It is true, if you dig anywhere in Exeter, you're probably going to find some Roman remains everywhere. The Romans absolutely loved Exeter. Its hilly terrain was brilliantly for defences. In later Roman times, they obviously built the very famous Exeter Wall that went around the old Roman settlements. They loved the river. The river was great. They could trade wool and other resources in and out with other towns. They took this settlement that was Exeter, named after the Ex, or body of water, from the old, I believe it was Anglo-Saxon term. Feel free to correct me on that if I'm wrong with that one. I believe it was Anglo-Saxon, definitely pre-Roman word meaning body of water, and Ex, and they gave it the name Exeter. Romans came in and changed that to Isca. Now, all Roman things aside, the historical building we're looking at today has its origins in the late medieval period, and that is the Old Exbridge. Nowadays, a picturesque site located in the middle of a major roundabout. Thousands of people drive in and out and through Exeter, passing this beautiful relic of our history every single day. As much of the footage from the drone you're going to see today will show, the site is in a little bit of disrespect, I'll say. Litter is everywhere, and despite one notice board I found on the entrance via 4th Street, not a lot of history on the building is available to the public who might go and visit it. So hopefully this video can bring some light to this, and we can get some people interested and excited about this site, and hopefully it'll get a bit of a rejuvenation as a result of this video, and hopefully some of you guys getting in on it. So our story begins in the 12th century. Now, this being the 12th century, the River Exe was much wider and shallower than what it is today. Centuries of irrigation, building have sort of remodeled it into what there is today, and the surrounding area was saturated with the runoff of this, and a lot of it was marshlands. Either side, the runoff would create these horrible marshy areas which are very difficult to cross, and not too great for building on. It will later find out. There is people who argue that there was a bridge prior to this, but if it was, this would have been a wooden footbridge, and there's much more evidence to say that people would have just waded through it with their cattle and carts. Again, not a huge amount of stuff going on at this time period, or prior to this time period, so it would just be easier to get on your horse and wade through the bogs and the waters from there. So the growing size of the city in the later part of the 11th century, two local people by the names of Nicholas, prepare for this butchering of the pronunciation here, Nicholas Gravesill and his son Walter saw the need for a sustainable transport link over the river, and for the farmers and trade to get cattle and resources from one end to the other. Sadly, they couldn't fund this on their own. There also doesn't seem to be much relevant information I could find about the two. There's plenty of records showing that Walter stood as mayor of Exeter multiple times, and it appears they built the Cricklet Mill. Pronunciation is going to be horrible on this, sorry. Which today is the headquarters for the Devon Wildlife Trust, believe it or not. But I am looking to do another video on that mill in particular, so I won't say much more on that. Despite supposedly being quite wealthy, the two couldn't fund the building on their own. They needed the help of some benefactors. So Walter went around the local region and supposedly higher up across England to appeal to their wealthy friends and citizens in the region, and they were able to gain £10,000 in donations, which allowed for the construction of the first proper bridge across the river. It also helped with them seizing some buildings in the local area that helped to maintain the building. And the bridge was finished in 1238, some 50 years after the two had set to build it. In this time, unfortunately, Nicholas had passed away, and Walter carried on his legacy with the building of the bridge. Just as a fun side fact, £10,000 in equivalent to today's money, nearly £7 million. So they had a big budget for this, showing you how important it was that this bridge be built. They went all over basically begging their mates to give them money so they could build this substantial bridge from one side of the river to the other. On screen now you can see a Google Maps that shows the old X bridge as it is today. It also shows the remains of St Edmund's Church, if I'm getting that correct. Feel free to slaughter me in the comments if I haven't done. For that was a replace by Walter to replace an earlier bridge that had been built on the marshes below, and in a later flood had been completely washed away. So when they built the bridge, they said, right, we'll rebuild this lovely church, and everyone can go there to preach as they would do. Back then being a much more religious time than what we have now. And on screen you can also see the south and north bridges constructed in 1972 and 1969 respectively, that later replaced other bridges that were across the road. So in the middle of the 15th century, sadly the bridge started to fall into disrepair. Several restorations and remodelings occurred until the 18th century, when the western part of the bridge was demolished because they were going to build a new bridge. So if you follow the bottom of 4th Street, they went, right, we're going to build a lovely bridge over this, which will better adapt to our modern traffic needs of the time. Again, leading on to St. Thomas, and on screen now you can see the Google Maps, where you can see where this roadway would have been, measuring about 25 foot 25 foot width of bridge there, to better cope with those needs. You can also see obviously the roof from the old bridge and everything as it is now. So during this time period, the new roadways were rerouted, and the remains of the old bridge were effectively buried underneath all this development. And then it wasn't until the 19th century, 1960s to be precise, when the church was hit by a quite terrifying fire. And this was in 1969. The church was hit with quite a devastating fire, and the building of the Western Way Road that we have there now sort of went through the church's route. So they went, right, demolish all these buildings and we'll get rid of the church as well, and we'll have this lovely new road that will help all of our modern day traffic. And as they started demolishing the old church, the builders sort of realised, well, there's a bridge under here. Hang on a minute. And they looked round and they found the old supports for the old church and all that. And they got some archaeologists in. And they sort of said, well, this is actually an historically important site for Exeter. Don't knock it down. So they rerouted the road. They made it into this central roundabout thing that we see here today. Very picturesque, very lovely. And hopefully soon to get a bit of a renaissance and just generically keeping it tidy and all that. And hopefully has inspired a few of you today to show a bit of interest in it, and hopefully a bit of interest in your own local little areas. For those of you interested in the history of the old Exbridge, on screen now are some links to some of the places where I went to get research, and where I no doubt find you'll get all the useful information you could want. For those of you more specifically interested in the history of St Edmund's Church, I'd love to do another video on that. So if you're interested, hit that like and subscribe button, and let me know in the comments that you want to see a video done on the history of St Edmund's Church. Other than that, here's some links you might find. Big shout out as well to Exeter Memories, hashtag not sponsored. They have a superb website full of loads of information about Exeter and its local history. They've also got a website where people who sort of live through it go, oh, I found Grandad's old photo of this, and people discuss it, and you get to learn loads and loads of lovely history about this beautiful city that we've done the video on today. If you like this, you want to help me get some better drones, learn to fly a bit better, and help me just generically do loads more videos on forgotten historical relics, please go to our Patreon, which is on screen now. That really does help us make more content. Also, we have Facebook and Instagram. Like us on there for updates and more drone photos as opposed to the video that you've seen mostly in this video. Other than that, until we fly again, fare thee well.